Today, I'm talking with Patrick Fitzgibbons. He is the podcast host for Criminal Justice Evolution Podcast. He is an author, a coach, an educator, retired law enforcement officer. Let's see, I just downloaded the one book that you offer for free. Sorry, I haven't started it yet. I wanted to read it before we talk, but you've been doing your podcast for about 5 years now.
Yeah.
How did you get started in the podcast game?
It's a great question, man. I mean, thanks for having me on, by the way. I appreciate it. Honored to be on your show. And, I just started it, like you said, about 5 years ago because, I listen to a lot of podcasts, like Joe Rogan, Lewis Howes, all these people, Gary V. I was constant. I still to this day listen to a lot of podcasts. And I remember driving around one night, and I was working and I said, I wonder if I could do that. There wasn't a lot of law enforcement, criminal justice podcasts at the time. And I just went for it, man, and did it and just kind of learned along the way. I'm still learning. But that was, 5 years ago, and I'm about over 400 episodes deep now. And my show is just, it's a criminal justice show, obviously, but I talk a lot about self-improvement and mindset and all these other things that first responders desperately need. And I know they're getting, different doses of it from different areas, but I wanted to continue to give back to, the profession. It was so good to me over the years. And yeah, it's been a great ride, man. As you know, being a fellow podcaster, I mean, it's great, man. I get to interview great people and learn along the way. I learn from every guest that comes on the show. So it's been a wild ride, man. And I'm busy. I think I'm more busier now than when I was working. So
now, how many years did you do in law enforcement?
23.
23.
So 23 years. I started, like most do, on patrol and worked my way up through the ranks and was a detective and street supervisor. And I retired as an operations commander. And that's kind of different in different departments, but I was in charge of the operations of the police department, which a big part of that is patrol. So, I did that for a while and decided to take my exit and it's been a great ride. I had a great career, ups and downs like any career, but it was a great ride.
All of your time spent there in Colorado?
Yeah, my whole law enforcement career was in Colorado, 2 different agencies. And then I also spent some time in the military down at North Carolina at the 82nd or with the 82nd Airborne down at Fort Bragg. So I always knew I wanted to be a cop. So I got out of the military and just went after it.
Did you do 4-year enlistment?
Yeah. I was in the Army with the 82nd, jumping out of perfectly good airplanes.
Yeah. Well, do you have like family history of military, that kind of thing?
Yeah, my dad was a career military officer. He was a JAG officer. For those of you who don't know what that is, that's a lawyer in the military. He started off in the Army, actually got drafted during Vietnam. Never went over to Vietnam, but he got drafted during the Vietnam era and spent a career going through the ranks. At one point in his career, he got out of the Army, went into the Air Force, and retired as a colonel in the Air Force. And he was a JAG officer. And then I have, officer, police officer blood in my blood because I have a lot of relatives, cousins, and uncles that were police officers in Chicago. So, I mean, yeah, it's in my blood. I always knew I wanted to serve in some capacity. I joined the military kind of later on than most people in 21, which is when I was 21, which is old compared to, some of these kids going in now. But yeah, I mean, I did my time in the military and knew I wanted to pursue a career in law enforcement, and the rest is history.
Nice. Now, a lot of what I talk about on my show is leadership development, and being a coach and an educator. I'm sure you talk with your clients about self-leadership and emotional intelligence. And I would imagine that a lot of your leadership philosophy stems directly from your time, well, probably growing up with your dad. Probably it was a big influence on you.
Oh, yeah.
And then your time in the military and your time as a law enforcement officer, moving up through the ranks.
Mhm.
Um, could you give me a sense of your personal leadership philosophy and maybe some of your influences that shaped that?
That's a great question. And like I said, I mean, a lot of it was military, a lot of military influence. Obviously, my father was a big influence on me, and law enforcement. I mean, leadership is a constant. I mean, I was always striving to grow professionally. You mentioned EQ or emotional intelligence. A lot of good leadership is based on that. It's something that we didn't talk about, emotional intelligence, when I was a young officer, but it's a cornerstone of good leadership now. I believe my leadership philosophy as one of the senior officers in my department is, look, I'm a pretty collaborative, democratic leader. I always like to tell my troops, meaning I think, the more ideas, the more information you have, the more collaboration that you have with your peers and your subordinates, I think the better decisions you're going to make. I can go into an autonomous role where I have to make decisions very, very quickly, and I can do that. And that's just the way I was trained. That's how I was brought up. But my leadership style, like I said, brother, is one of, being collaborative. Most of the time in law enforcement, maybe you know this, maybe you don't, and your listeners know it, maybe they don't. You have time on your side, believe it or not. So you can collaborate, you can ask questions, you can get some bounce ideas off people. So that's my leadership style, and it served me well over the years. And again, not that I can't make decisions that I do all the time, if I have to split second, but my philosophy was always, you know, I would just want to surround myself with good people who are, going to, collaborate with me, bounce ideas off me. And, I remember a time that's sticking in my mind right now when, I was in a room with a bunch of, junior officers. And of course I was the senior guy in the room and I was in charge, and I was asking them, what do they think about, this problem or issue that was coming up. And I asked one of the officers, and he said, "Well, sir, you're in charge." I said, "Well, I know I'm in charge. You don't have to remind me I'm in charge, but I want to hear your opinions, because I think the more opinions you have and the more ideas you have, you're going to make better decisions." So I hope I answered your question. That's part of my leadership style. And again, that served me well, over the years.
Now, can you talk about some of your influences and um, maybe people along the way, whether it's people that you led or people that were mentors of yours? That
Yeah. I mean, I had my first chief of police was a huge mentor and coach of mine, and he had a great leadership style. A lot of it was, like I just said, kind of a collaborative kind of leadership role, but he could switch on that, autonomous role when he had to. He was a big mentor, big influence in my law enforcement career. A lot of people that when I was a young officer, a lot of sergeants, a couple sergeants in particular, there were big influences on me, and they kind of took me under their wing, and they were positive influences. And when I say positive in law enforcement, I always tell young officers, you want to align yourself up with the people that are the go-getters, that are the take charge, that have a positive attitude. Law enforcement's just like any other job, brother, where you get in some departments, on all departments, you get people who want to be there, and then you get people who don't want to be there, or maybe they're just retired on duty and they're just, collecting a paycheck and their attitude kind of sucks. So I had those type of, choices to make in my law enforcement career. And I was blessed and fortunate to seek out those mentors, whether it be, and they didn't even have to have rank either. I mean, a lot of the people, my influences when, I was coming up through the ranks in law enforcement, were just fellow officers, but they had that innate leadership quality that I wanted to build on, coming out of the military. So, I mean, I had a ton of influences, growing in my career and throughout my life. And I continue to have those. And that's I'm glad you asked that, because for the listeners, I mean, there's so much information around you, especially now within the digital age we live in. And I always tell people, it doesn't matter what age you are. I mean, I have mentors right now, people that I look up to, that I routinely bounce ideas off and get advice from. So it's never too late to get a mentor or a coach, I mean, but you just got to have that open mind. You got to be able to say, hey, I want to continue to learn. But I had a lot of coaches and a lot of mentors, in my life. You can't do it alone. I know some people think you can't, they can, but the reality is it's a team effort. Every successful person out there it took a team, it took mentors and coaches and stuff. Hell, Tiger Woods has a coach. And I mean, all these top athletes, I mean, that's another way to look at it. I mean, everybody has a coach and a mentor. And like I said, Tiger Woods, you got a fitness coach, a golf coach. You're thinking, well, he was the number one player in the world. Yeah. He still has a coach. He still has a coach because he's constantly striving to get better. So yeah, I had many coaches, brother, throughout my career, personal and professional, still do. And yeah, I mean, they serve me well, but you got to have that open mind.
Now, I noticed that, I might be wrong. I might have read it wrong, but it appeared that you've got 2 master's degrees.
Actually, I have 3.
All right. So, why 3? And can you talk about how that higher education has shaped your professional career and your personal life?
Yeah, great question, man. And why 3? I don't know why sometimes, but I just love education, and I saw another degree that I wanted to go after, and I went for it. I think I'm done with degrees now, but yeah, I got plenty of them. I wish I could put them all together and get cash them in for a PhD, but I can't do that. But yeah, I love education. I'm a lifelong learner. I actually went to Northwestern University when I was a commander, their staff and command school. So that's another thing that I did. That was a certificate program, a very rigorous program. It was kind of like the FBI Academy. I don't know if you know this, brother, but every year, departments send, a couple people from each department around the country into the FBI Academy. It's not to become agents, but to learn the FBI way. And Northwestern is kind of along those lines. But yeah, I love education. I've been teaching, on the college level for over a decade now. And, that was part of the reasons why I kept going after more education, because you need that education to teach on the college level. And it served me well. Like I said, I tell, young officers to go after that college education, because a lot of departments require college now. And definitely, if you want to go through, throughout the ranks, there, in most departments, you got to have at least a master's degree to get those higher, echelon positions like commander or deputy chief or even chief. So, it served me well, man. And like I said, I love education. I'm an educator now, teaching on the college level. And yeah, I like it very much. And that's a great question. I often get that. Why 3 master's degrees? Well, because I could. And but I'm done with the formal education now. But yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, when I started working on my master's degree, I did it reluctantly, and thank God I did. The value that I got out of it, was something that I was not really aware would come. I just did it because I didn't want there to be an obstacle in my way if I decided to move up in the ranks, and then the value that I got from it, and it's served me well, like you said. And the one thing that I wanted to touch on is a lot of the books that I've read on leadership, and whether it be authored by a military leader or somebody that teaches leadership, somebody that goes out and lectures business leaders on how to be better leaders. These books, without fail, somewhere in there, it'll say that leaders read and leaders teach. And I've only come across a couple of people that, when I talk to them about their leadership philosophy and how they've developed, there's only a couple of them that are like, well, never really read a whole lot. But the thing is that they actually did. They just don't see it that way. A lot of the education that they did, they were constantly training. So they were reading the materials for those courses, but they don't view it as like reading to develop as a leader.
Yeah.
However, that's really what helped shape them. Um, what are some of the books that you've got on your bookshelf that have helped you along the way?
Just so many, Colonel Dave Grossman's a friend of mine, and I've read a lot of his stuff. Just a lot, and Tony Robbins and things like that. I mean, not necessarily. Now, some people might be listening and say, "Wait a minute, how come you're not reading, books on law enforcement?" Because I think there's so much more out there. As a matter of fact, a lot of what law enforcement has now and along the way, they've got from the private sector. So, so I read a lot of things now, that are from, I'm reading a book, or I read a book. God, what's his name? Ray Dalio. Yeah, hedge fund guy, but he one of the richest guys in the world, a multi-billionaire. He started a hedge fund, years ago. And so he talked, and then what does that have to do with law enforcement? Well, he talks about leadership, and he talks about these principles. In fact, that's the name of the book, Principles. And so I read all the time, and I'm constantly reading, but I'm reading a lot more nowadays. I'm reading a lot more self-help, like ways to improve your mind and mindset and stuff like that. Because I think a lot of leadership is not only theory and reading, which is good, but I think a lot of it's mindset too. I mean, I think how you think, what's going on between the 6 inches between your ears, and how you look at life. And I'm a big believer in law of attraction. What you put out there, you're going to get back. And I think that I didn't used to believe that, but I do now. So to answer your questions, yeah, I got a lot of books behind me, a wide variety of books. Like I said, I'm a huge Tony Robbins fan, Lewis Howes fan. Gary Vaynerchuk, I read a lot of his stuff. James Altucher was on my show. Choose Yourself is a great book I recommend. A lot of, you wouldn't think of them as the typical leadership book, but they're great books because they're coming from these influencers and these entrepreneurs that really have some good insight to leadership. And of course, I love the law enforcement aspect of it too. I read some law enforcement stuff still because I like to keep up on my toes. And I mentioned Colonel Dave Grossman. Great guy. Gil Martin, Dr. Kevin Gil Martin, just read Emotional Wellness for First Responders a couple of weeks ago again. So those are all leadership books. Indirectly, directly, there are leadership books, so I love reading, and I read all the time. And I don't know about you, brother, but I tend to, start a book, and then I read like a quarter of it, and then I put it down and start another book, and then I go back to that book. So I got a lot of different books going on at once most of the time.
I'm the exact same way. I've got my Kindle somewhere, plus the Audible.
Oh yeah, so do I.
Yeah, it's that's pretty cool. The where I was going with this, and you hit the nail on the head with mindset, and I've talked to quite a few different people about that particular aspect of leadership, how you carry yourself, the way that you approach issues, problems, your relationships, all that. And one of the things that I've studied and written about is philosophy. And so years ago, when I first started studying leadership, I came across this lecture on the United States Naval Academy website. And it was this lecture that I blew my mind. And then it was nested in this one section of the website that fell under the School of Leadership, the Admiral James Stockdale Leadership Academy, or I don't remember exactly the name of what that is, but it's named after Admiral James Stockdale. So I started reading about him because the Navy has their leadership school for their officers named after this guy, so he must
be important.
Yeah. So I started reading about him, and one of the things that he talks about is his study of Stoicism, Stoic philosophy, and then the parallels to Stoic philosophy and what a lot of mental health professionals use today for treatment of PTSD for first responders is that cognitive behavioral therapy,
Mm-hmm.
which is rooted in Stoic philosophy. And it's all about how you approach those things that you have control over and the things that you don't have control over. And it ties in to that mindset of never giving up. There is no quit. There is no failure unless you give up.
Yeah.
And I was just curious as to um, your thoughts on mindset, how you shape it, and what the most effective mindset for a leader in public service
Yeah.
would be.
Great question. And it's interesting you mentioned Stoicism. I have a Seneca book around here somewhere where he was a great Stoic.
Yeah.
Mindset is everything, brother. I mean, it is. Now, if you would have talked to me about mindset, I don't know, a decade ago, 10 years ago, I would have been like, what are you talking about? Meditation, flowing robes, all this other crap. No, not for me. I was in one of the toughest military units in the military, and we just dealt with shit. We didn't deal with, same with law enforcement, a new officer, you just dealt with it. And there really wasn't an outlet, at least then. There is now more outlets, where we recognize PTSD and we have peer support groups and all that stuff, which is great. What I tell people is you need to start and practice, have a mindfulness practice that you do every day. I do every day. I mean, and it has helped me tremendously, man. I'm telling you. I mean, there's a reason why spec op guys now and, NFL teams and all these other sports teams are practicing mindfulness because it works. The science backs it up. I mentioned law of attraction before. I tell people, and this is in the, if you ever read the book, The Secret, I would recommend people do that, right? Rhonda Byrne, but she talks about law of attraction. Look, you're a human magnet. What you put out there, you're going to get back. You attract things. If you're negative and pissed off all the time, you're going to get that in return. If you're happy and, generally positive, not living in a bubble, everybody has bad days. I do, you do probably, but overall, if you're happy, you're going to probably get that in return. So mindfulness is everything. Now, how does that equate to law enforcement? It equates to law enforcement because we are in an inherently negative environment. That's just the nature of the job. That's just the job. Nobody calls the cops when everything is going great. They call the cops when what hits the fan. So over the years, that negativity, the death, the trauma, the pain and suffering, as you probably know, and it's going to wear on you. I know it did me. Yeah. And I suffered from depression and PTSD and all these other things that I've seen, but got help for it. Thank God I did. But there was a point in my life where I was like, okay, I could stay on this journey, this road right here. Or I can kind of start changing the way I think, realizing that the world doesn't suck. Everybody doesn't suck because that's going to affect your relationships. I did mine. I mentioned that when we started, brother, that I'm a blended family, got divorced after 20 years of marriage. And a lot of that was due to my mindset, negative mindset, and I'm not blaming the profession for that. I'm blaming myself because I allowed it. The point I'm trying to make is that we're in a negative environment. Now you can let that eat you away. You can let that grind at you. You can let that affect you, or you can change your mindset. Look, there's a lot of shit we can't control in the world, but the 6 inches between your ears, you can. And you can control whether or not you want to be pissed off when you wake up in the morning or whether or not you want to have a good day. Nobody controls your happiness but you. Right. Nobody does. I mean, a lot of people look for, relationships. They look, I'm going to make money. Once I make money, I'm going to, everything's going to be fine. No, it won't unless you change your mindset. Right. So that, I was at a point like that in my career, brother, and I shifted my mindset, taking care of myself better, physically, eating better, getting sleep. Sleep is golden to me now. It didn't used to be when I was a young cop. 4 or 5 hours of sleep, I'm Superman. I can deal with that. Yeah. That's how I was conditioned in the military. 2 or 3 hours of sleep, good to go. It's not good for you. It's not good for you. And that affects your mindset. It affects everything. So again, I tell people all the time, well, I don't have time to meditate. Bullshit. You got time. Make five minutes a day. Quit binging on Netflix and start working on yourself. So everything in my world now revolves around mindset. Do I have bad days? Absolutely. But most of my days are good. 99% of them are good, 98%, because I fall back to that mindfulness. And I tell people all the time, my job sucks. Okay, at least you have a job. Well, this sucks. At least, okay, you're alive, right? You should be grateful for that. So gratefulness and being grateful and mindfulness practices, those are all part of the mindfulness like we've been talking about. So, I'm grateful for everything in my life. First of all, being able to sit here and talk to you. And so for the people out there that, my life sucks. Okay, well, you're alive. That's a good thing to be grateful for. I don't know if you've ever, who James or Gary Vaynerchuk is. He gave this keynote speech a couple years back. And he comes out and he says 400 trillion to 1. You know what that is? 400 trillion to 1. That's the chances of you being born. I'm not making up that shit. It's statistically, that's the statistics. So when I first heard that years ago, I was like, holy crap. That really kind of puts a different perspective on things, right? So you're alive, right? You're alive. So if you look at the statistical probability, it's relatively low, but a lot of us take it for granted. I know I do sometimes, but then I come back to, wait a minute, life is short. I'm grateful to be here. And statistically, I shouldn't be here, but I'm glad I'm here. So you have much to live for. Start being grateful. That all ties into mindfulness.
Yeah. You mentioned Seneca.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've taken from his writings is that recommendation to essentially journal.
Mm-hmm.
You write.
Oh, absolutely, man.
Write your goals out in the morning. Like these are the things that I want to keep present in my mind. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. Journal.
And then before you go to bed, write down the things that went well, the things that
exactly
didn't actually turn out the way you were hoping, but you balance the ledger for the day and you can sleep better at night. And
exactly right, man. And I'm glad you brought that up, brother. I mean, journaling is so important. Again, this is one of the things I never thought was very important, but I've been journaling for years now. And it does. It lets me, I like what you start out. What I do is I start out, the first thing on my journal is the things I'm grateful for. What do I want to accomplish today? And then at the end, and there's more to that, but you get the gist. And then at the end of the day, like you said, I go through, okay, again, what am I grateful for? How well, what would I have liked to think, what could I control differently during the day? I could have done better, stuff like that. And then I do that. And then when I go to bed, I visualize maybe I could have handled a situation differently. So when I go to bed, I think of how I could have handled it differently than I did. And I imagine how I could have done that. I know it sounds weird. And then I always top off the night before I go to sleep with, okay, tomorrow's gonna be a great day. Grateful for this day I have right now. And I wake up refreshed, jazzed, and start the process over. Yeah. And I'm so glad you mentioned journaling, because the science proves that the more we write down, whether it's goals or whatever, when we see it in writing, or it's more apt to come to fruition, rather than I can't remember shit. I'm getting too old. I can't remember all the stuff that's going on in my head. If I have a goal in my head, I have to write it down. Visualization, you can't see it right here, but I got a vision board right in front of me right now. And so on my wall, and I have it on my wallpaper too. So I recommend people not only journal, but visualize. Visualization is key. And I talk about that in my book. I talk about it with people I talk to. You have to visualize what you want in life. Now, there's a caveat. It comes with action. You can visualize, but you have to follow it up with action. And statistics, again, science, the more you visualize, the more you back it up with action, it's probably going to come true. So write down your goals. I would encourage people to do a vision board. Again, if you would ask me this a couple of years ago, what are you talking about? Collage and shit like that. Yeah. But it's worked for me. And yeah, there you go. There you go, man. So you and I mean, we're on the same page, brother. It's just a matter of trying to convince other people because I was a cynic, like most people. Well, I shouldn't say like most people. I was a cynic, starting out going, stuff doesn't work. It works.
Yeah.
And the more grateful you are, the more it's going to come into your life, and like I said, one of the things, I did in law enforcement, and again, this isn't a dig on first responders, but I started associating myself with people outside of law enforcement. And that's what I would recommend for people in the profession, especially the people that have been doing it a while, especially those people that have become jaded and kind of cynical and things like that. And again, this isn't a dig on law enforcement. I love the brave men and women in, the first responder community. But what helped me and what's helped friends that I've seen is when they get friends outside of law enforcement, because then you get a different perspective on things. There used to be a time I wouldn't associate with somebody who didn't have a gun and a badge. And I admit that. I didn't trust them. You're you, I'm me, you're them, it's us against them kind of stuff. Until my wife said, I want you to meet some of my friends. And initially I was like, no, I don't do that. They're probably criminals. I got to run them, all that stuff. I mean, they're DOBs and all this other shit. Until I started going out with them and I started opening up my mind and realizing these are actually good people. In fact, most people out there, in my opinion, are good people. It's just, as law enforcement, we're dealing with the 10% or whatever percentage, the repeat offenders, and that just jades us. Yeah. It did me for many years until I changed my mindset and started, listening to books that were filling me up, not draining me, and associating with people who were lifting me up, not draining me. There's a saying out there by Jim Rohn, you're the average of the 5 people you associate with. I agree with that 100%, 110%. Who's your tribe? Who are you associating with? Are those people lifting you up, or are they bringing you down? And realize as you grow and you move throughout life, those people are probably going to come in and out of your life. But I would encourage people out there who have toxic relationships and toxic friendships. You don't need those people in your life. I know that sounds curt and it sounds shitty, but you should be selfish when it comes to who you're associating yourself with. Yeah. You should. It's your life. When somebody calls me up, friend or relatives calls me up and just wants to dump on me and toxic, not that I can't listen to people, but if it's happening all the time, you don't need that person in your life. And sometimes it's hard, especially when it's family. Look, you can love family members. You don't have to hang out with them all the time if they're toxic. There's no rule saying, well, you got to listen to my shit because we're brother and sister. No, there's no rule. Yeah. You control who you allow into your inner circle. You can control that. But so many people I talk to, well, I can't offend them. They might get mad. Ooh, can't have that. You have to be very, very conscious about who you are associating yourself with. Well, how does that tie into leadership? It has everything to do with leadership. How does that tie with mindset? It has everything to do with mindset. It does. Yeah. If you are around people that are happy and positive, guess what? That shit's going to rub off on you. Yep. If you're around negative people, guess what? The opposite. And that affects leadership. Yeah. That affects leadership, and it's going to affect the way you lead people. It's going to affect your decisions. It's going to affect everything. So I'm a big believer, as you can tell, pretty passionate about mindset and gratitude practices and all that stuff, because it is so important to leadership, especially in these days, with COVID and all this other stuff going on in the world where people are isolated, they're depressed and stuff like that. You gotta get out. You gotta surround yourself with people who are lifting you up and say goodbye to the people that are bringing you down. Sorry, I went on a rant.
No, that was great. I wanted to talk a little bit about your book. How did you?
Shameless plug right here. So I got out of law enforcement, retired in 2019. And, one of the first things I wanted to do was write a book. Like I said, I had a great career and I wanted to continue to give back. So Evolve is an acronym, actually, and it's just a small little micro book. I'll send you a copy, brother. And you downloaded the ebook version, but it's, it's not a very long book. We know cops can't read. No, I'm just kidding. It's about 57 pages. And Evolve, like I said, is an acronym. And so I talk about my career a little bit and I give some advice, some things I've learned along the way. So the E is elevate. Elevate your mindset. We've been talking about it a lot. Elevate. So that's the E. V is visualize, which we've been talking about, because I love visualization. But again, you got to pack that up with action.
Right.
O is for others, who you're surrounding yourself with. Very important. L is love yourself, because if you don't love yourself, how are you going to love everybody else if you don't have faith in your abilities and faith in doing a good job and all this other stuff? It deals with love. So if you don't love yourself first, how are you going to love anybody else? And so V is victory. Celebrate those victories every day. You have all these victories to celebrate. Waking up, that's a victory. Having a job, having a loving family, friendships, those are all victories that you have to celebrate. And E is every day be your best. So I wrote a micro book that ties in with my coaching. But again, I just wanted to do something. And it's not just it's really for anybody, but I aimed it at first responders, since my background is law enforcement. But yeah, I had a great time, writing the book. My wife, thank God for her. She's the one that kind of looked at, editing and saying, wait a minute, you're a dumbass. This is spelled wrong. You need to do this, and stuff like that. So God bless her, she helped me. And then, again, it was published. Performance Publishing are awesome. There's a plug. And again, I'm just happy that I did it, because it was I wanted to continue to give back. And of course, it's on my website. If anybody wants a signed copy, they just reach out to me. But I would encourage everybody to write, especially first responders. I mean, whether it's fire, EMS, police, I mean, everybody has a book in them, I think, at some point, with all the stuff they see and experiences they go through. But it was a wild ride, man. Wrote the book in about 6 months. So it was good.
Nice. One of the things that leads me to is your coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about somebody that you've coached that not only for you, but for that individual, it was life-changing? Go ahead.
That was, I can think of one. I won't name names, but I can think of one. Last year, towards the end of last year, I coached this individual, this guy who, was, thinking about retiring. He did 15 years and was, kind of, he was tired of law enforcement. That happens, people get burned out. I mean, and not just in law enforcement, but, other first responder fields. So he contacted me and say, hey, man, I listen to your stuff, I love it. I want to work with you. And so long story short, his main crux was, thinking that he was pigeonholed. He was pigeonholed to believing that he couldn't do anything else. Law enforcement, man, I'm just too set in my ways and I can't do anything else. I'm not smart enough. And so, a big part of that, brother, is tearing down those misconceptions, those beliefs that this person, and there's plenty of people out there like that build this false perception or false image of themselves where, they can't do anything else. And one of the problems, and we just hit on it a couple moments ago, is he was surrounding himself with people that were telling him, oh shit, man, you can't do anything else. You're just a cop. You've been a cop. You can't do anything else. Hey, I guarantee you, dude, he had people telling him this, that you're going to be back. You're going to go ahead and retire, and then you're going to be back the next day. So like we've been talking about, I had to kind of teach him to program himself to the believing that he could do whatever he wanted. He could have a second career. This guy wanted to go and start his own catering business, and because he loved to cook. And I'm thinking, wow, that's pretty cool. For law enforcement to catering. Long story short, he has that business now. And it's not because of me necessarily. It's because I just gave him the tools and I kind of gave him the confidence. Coaches, coaches don't really, yeah, they give advice and they mentor and stuff, but you have the magic. It's in you to do the work. So I was just giving them some tools, how to break down those barriers. And I know I've been there. And one of those was, quit hanging around with the people that are telling you can't do it, and you can do anything you want. My God, you're a first responder, dude. You were running into shit when people were running away. First responders, it never ceases to amaze me that so many of them, they get, and I get it. They have this limited belief that they can't do much else. And I try to, look, man, you are a rare breed. You know that. How many people run into danger? Not very much. You can do anything you want in your life. So it's a matter of just coaching and giving people tools to unlock that potential. inside of him. And long story short, this guy has his own food truck now, very successful. And but again, it wasn't necessarily me. He had the magic in him all the time. He had the potential. It's just a matter of kind of giving him that nudge. And so that's just one example, and, but a lot of it is, people transitioning from law enforcement into the private sector or starting, being entrepreneurs or doing whatever. You mentioned my book. Well, I had people that I was reaching out to, and my coaches were like, man, do it. You can do anything you want. You had a great career. You were military. You just have to, you have to believe and visualize you're going to do that. And that's a lot of it, man. I mean, but again, a lot of it is, we just build up these walls that we can't, do something. And then it's conditioning. I mean, think about it this way, brother. You got a kid. I have kids. Imagine, how fearless were you, for example, when you were a kid? I was pretty fearless. I mean, because as a toddler, you can do anything, right? There's no barriers. There's no walls. Yeah. It's only as we go older, people are telling you you can't do it. And they're instilling their insecurities on you or in you. And that's, look at it. You want to see joy and happiness and a zest for life. Look at a kid. They're not conditioned yet. That's how we should all be as adults, right? I mean, then that's when you should really start living life. But too often we get conditioned, whether it's a job, whether it's a sibling, whether it's parents. As we grow older, not all of us, but a lot of us. Look at how many people, brother. 2/3 of people out there hate their jobs. Too many people go to their jobs every day and say, I hate this shit. Yeah. I don't want to do it. Well, why? Well, because a lot of them are following their dreams of somebody else that they wanted them to take this role. They're not following their own dreams. So again, what's the saying? If you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. Yeah. I'm doing what I love right now. I love what I'm doing, and you find that bliss, man. Find that thing that gets you up in the morning. Life's too short to be saying, yeah, shit, I hate my job, but you got to have a paycheck. And I get that. You got to pay the bills. But if you're unhappy, dude, go get another job. Or if you're unhappy in a relationship, get out of the relationship. Does it suck? Yeah, I've been there. Went through a divorce. It sucks, but I'm happier for it. Yeah. So you got to take those steps. That goes into that action. Nothing's going to fall in your lap. Right. Nothing's going to fall in your lap.
I wanted to, I don't know, dig a little bit deeper into your law enforcement background and just, hypothetically, if you had an unlimited budget and you could make some significant changes to law enforcement in the United States, what would be your main priority?
Wow. That's a great question. I mean, there's so many different things. I mean, off the top of my head, I would spend a limited budget. I would spend a lot more on officer wellness and like we've been talking about, having resources, a lot more resources for mindfulness programs for officers. I would cover that a lot more in academies, because I used to teach in the academy, instruct in the police academy, and that topic of self-care, it's covered now, but very little of it is devoted now in curriculum. And I get it. There's post requirements and hourly requirements. I get that. But if I had an unlimited budget, I would spend a lot more money and resources on, officer care and stuff. And I know we do to some degree, but we could be doing a hell of a lot more. Look, our officers are committing suicide at alarming rates. As you probably know, 2019 is off to a horrible start. Or 2020 was horrible year in terms of officer suicide. So I would spend a lot more in terms of mindfulness, and in teaching officers to better take care of themselves, and I know that's a hot topic now. I know people are talking about it, but are we really doing it? Well, if you have an unlimited budget, that's the one thing I would focus on. And of course, all the other stuff, the skills training, that's all important. But if you don't have, mentally fit, I'm not saying officers aren't mentally fit, but if you have officers that are struggling out there, which a lot are on various levels, again, that's going to impact everything else. So I would spend a lot more, like I said, on officer wellness and self-care, and a lot more education on that, a lot more resources for officers, because the point is, brother, people are getting out. I mean, there's people not knocking. I mean, it is so hard now, because I used to be in charge of recruiting and that was before COVID and George Floyd and all these other high profile incidents. it was hard. I mean, we've seen, recruitment going down over the years. Now, people are getting out. Most cops I know are looking for an exit ramp. They want out for whatever reason. A lot of it is, they just don't like the environment, I mean, anti-police sentiment. So I would spend a lot more on self-care. And like I said, and getting resources to the officers, because the bottom line, that's what I was alluding to, is people aren't knocking down the door to become cops anymore. I mean, a lot are, thank God for them, but we don't have at least in my world right here, in the part of the world I'm at, it's very, very hard to keep, to recruit, for one, and keep and retain good officers. Not that, every good officer is leaving, but again, I would spend a lot more on, wellness and self-care and things like that. That's got to be a priority, man, in my point of view.
And I thought of this maybe a week ago, because I've had this conversation several times about that stigma surrounding actually seeking help.
Yeah.
And maybe even thinking, well, man, if I go and get help, I'm going to be labeled this way, weak, broken, whatever. But then even if you're taking a green recruit and talking to them about this stuff, because I know when I was going through the fire academy and going through orientation when I got hired, the last thing on my mind was the cumulative effect of seeing what I was seeing, because at that time, that's what I got in the job for. I was gung-ho, I wanted to get dirty. I wanted to help people. I knew I was going to see stuff. And so my mindset, I don't even know if any amount of education would have stuck with me at that point, because I'd be like, I'm tough. And so I think without a doubt, we need more education, more training, that kind of thing. I agree with you wholeheartedly, but I don't know how you would break down that wall, that machismo, that kind of like tough guy mentality, and what do you think about that?
Well, I think, and I understand where you're coming from. I mean, I was the same way. But like you said, it's a cumulative effect. So what I would do is, bring in people that were, these tough guys, and I'm not discounting toughness. It's very important, but bring down people who have, had that approach. That it like me, that it was a cumulative effect. Look, I was hardcore, man. I mean, I'm old now, but when I was a young cop, I was young and a gun, and then it was a cumulative effect. And I have no problem going in and talking to people and saying, look, guys, I mean, I know you got a whole career in front of you, and women, you got a whole career in front of you. I know you want to go out there and do what you want to do, but you have to take this stuff seriously. You have to get debriefed, and, you have to, when you go through an OIS or a critical incident, you have to take that, you have to talk to somebody, you have to do that. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but I would recommend you talk to somebody and get that out, because when you keep that stuff in, man, as you know, that stuff is going to, it's going to spill over, and it will eventually. So I agree with you. It's hard to get through that younger officer or firefighter, their mindset, but I think we can be doing a lot more and bringing in, do briefing trainings and stuff like that, and putting a lot more resources than we do. Like I said, until it's, so we're really good, we're as taking care of everybody else, in the fire, I can't speak for the fire service, but in law enforcement, we're really good at taking care of everybody else, right? The community, really bad at taking care of ourselves for the most part,
right?
Until it's too late, until people are killing themselves, until we get into a fight with our wife and push her and get drunk. And I mean, it's all kinds of stuff. I mean, I think we need to do a better job until it gets to that point, and it starts, in my opinion, when you're young. I mean, what do they teach you? What do we used to do? We used to go in there in law enforcement and teach grade school kids and elementary school kids about drugs, right? Okay, because you get them when they're young. We could do the same thing better than we're doing with young officers, and saying, these are the effects. This is what's going to happen. Pretty good chance if you ignore this stuff and suppress it. I had a great guy. I can't remember his name, but he was one of the firefighters that responded to the Oklahoma City bombing. And he was the one on Time Mag. He was on my show, just an amazing guy. And I can't remember his name. I just feel horrible. I can't remember his name, but he was the one carrying the baby on Time Magazine. Yeah. And I was talking to him on my show, and he was a young officer or a young firefighter at that time. And he was like, nah, just buried it. And then what do you think happened? Stuff you don't hear. He talks about it now. I remember hearing about that stuff when I was a young firefighter. I heard it once and it was gone. That incident changed his life, changed everybody's life. But he couldn't escape that. And it manifested in, suicidal tendencies, ideations, his relationship failed. Thank God he was able to save his marriage. And I bring that up again, not to brag about the show. I'm just saying that he was a young firefighter that, nothing's going to affect me. It will. Look, we're human. There's only so much trauma and human suffering. Like I said, you can see. I don't care how tough you think you are. It will affect you down the road. It will. And the more, in my opinion, the more we can talk about this to our young officers and young first responders, I think the better we prepare them for, you can't make anybody do anything. I mean, you can voluntold people to do stuff, but the more education and the more stuff we have available for young officers, and not even young officers, just, people that have been doing it for a while, the better off we're going to be, I think, with trying to get a handle on, depression rates in first responder communities, suicide rates. It's a tough topic.
Yeah. Yeah. I've talked about this quite a bit, and I'm really trying to reduce the stigma surrounding seeking assistance. And part of it, I think, goes to, it is a responsibility of our senior people being good leaders and looking out for the well-being, and that mindset of their success is my success. If I can help them get beyond that stigma, if I can help them not suffer the way that I have or whatever, if they can take these young probationary officers, firefighters under their wing and be like, look, this is the stuff you're going to see. Yeah, initially it's, that what we got into the business for,
Yeah.
But it's going to add up.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Exactly everything that you were just saying. But I do believe that there is a sense of responsibility that our senior people should have.
I absolutely. And then a big part of this falls on leadership, but I would just piggyback on what you said, brother. If you and I are young firefighters and we have no rank and we're not leaders or anything, and I notice a behavioral change in you and you notice one in me, I think we have a duty as friends and as fellow coworkers to call each other out on that. Dude, what's going on, man? What's going on in your life? I'm worried about you. What I've seen throughout my career in some instances, not all instances, is, really good friends, but it's just Patrick, maybe he's just having a bad day. And we all have bad days, like we said at the beginning. But if that's the behavior now, something's going wrong. And I hate leadership they don't catch everything. So if they should catch a lot more than they do, but if you and I are buddies, like I said, and I notice something's going on. I mean, you're talkative all the time, dude, but now you're silent or it's prolonged and it's going out day after day after day. And I have a duty as your friend to step in, even though how uncomfortable it is, to say, man, what's going on, man? Can I help you with anything? I mean, so I think, the more eyes we have on this, the better off it's going to be. It can't just be on leadership. And I'm not saying you're saying that. I think leadership is an important role, but I think it's everybody within an organization. It's everybody from the new person, to all the way up to the top. Everybody has a responsibility. Can you imagine being that person? Like if you and I, buddy, we're close, we're friends, we're hanging out all the time. I notice a behavioral change, a pattern change, or whatever. Your attitude is going down the tube. And then I didn't say anything because I just don't want to say anything, man. I don't want to say anything. I don't want to upset him. And then God forbid you do something to yourself. And I'm like, holy shit, I should have said something. And not it's about me, it's about you. But I'm like, I should have stepped in, and said something. So I agree with you. I mean, it's the stigma. It's a culture within an organization. I think every organization has their own different culture, which is another topic on itself, is we have to change the culture. I was fortunate enough to be in an organization where, officers were encouraged to come forward, and they weren't labeled or stigmatized, and they weren't saying, and if that did happen, we would shut that shit down and or do the best job we can. But that comes from leadership, that type of culture. So I was really, blessed to be in an environment where if we had an OIS or an officer involved shooting, we had one a couple of years before I left, everybody's going through that debrief, and we're going to have counselors right there. Well, you're going. I'm volunteering you to do it. Whether you sit there with your arms crossed, I don't need this shit, but you're going to listen. And again, most of the officers, they're open to that now, and they're open, to, I had an officer come to me, a couple of years back, and, he went to his, sergeant, followed chain of command. He came to me, and he was having problems in his relationship, and he wanted to let me know in case. I appreciate that. Oh my God. So we have a conversation. So, but it's becoming, at least again, it depends on where you're at. It depends on where you're at. But I do think, like in my area, my neck of the woods, I think it's getting better and better with the stigmatizing of, oh shit, Patrick needs help, and I don't want to work with that guy anymore. There's too much of it going on, brother, we have to change. And, I think it's becoming more and more normal. I hate to say it, officers that are suffering with stuff. And so I think we have to adapt. And again, in my neck of the woods, in my world, right, where because I'm still tuned into law enforcement around here, they're more accepting of it, and they're not going to stigmatize, and, and everybody goes through shit. That everybody has baggage, everybody has it. It's how you deal with it. And again, I remember as a young officer being in, critical incidents, is all right, man, do your paperwork, get back out there. It's not, again, I can't speak for everybody out there. I don't think it's like that anymore. It's getting a lot better with peer support and all these other, employee assistance. I think it depends on where you're at, but peer support groups are very popular now where I'm at, and we got a lot more resources. I do think we need a lot more, so.
Yeah. Thank you so much for talking about all of that with me.
Oh yeah.
There's on my website, I've got a whole page dedicated to mental health resources.
Yeah.
So if anybody listening is in one of those places right now, there's resources out there for law enforcement and fire department. There's so many resources that are free that can get you beyond that broken feeling.
Yeah.
You
just got to take that first step, man. And like you said, brother, I mean, there's, you just have to take that first step, and nobody needs to suffer. There's a lot of help out there. And, like you said, there's resources on your page. I talk about it a lot on my show, put a lot of stuff in my show notes regarding resources. The bottom line is that you can't, nobody expects you to do this alone. There's a lot of resources out there, and you're not going to be judged. At least I hope you're not. But you just need to reach out for help. A lot of stuff out there.
I joined several Facebook groups that are geared towards fire service, PTSD type deals. And it kind of blew me away when I was reading some of these posts that it seems to be smaller departments really have that stigma, and those individuals that are suffering are doing it by themselves. And they're hats off to them for reaching out into the Facebook world to try and get that friendly ear, because they're not getting it at their agency.
And that's a leadership issue, man. I mean, that is a direct, in my opinion, that's directly, leadership. I mean, with all the stuff that's going on, it's always been going on, brother, but with COVID and all, we're already isolated now. I was talking to officers now that, they're wearing masks and stuff. They have to, obviously, but they feel more isolated than ever, and, a lot of them are depressed and things like that. But like you said, the point is, that's a leadership issue. That is a leadership issue within smaller agencies, every agency, where leadership needs to say, all right, times are tough. They've always been tough, but, we're here for you. And, we're going to provide you the resources to get you the help you need. And again, I think I'm blessed to have, worked in an agency, my last agency, that was really, really good with recognizing this and being on top of it instead of, being more reactive. They were a lot more proactive when it came to getting, some resources out in front of the officers and, really being dialed into, and that's another thing too. I mean, knowing your troops, for the frontline supervisors out there, and even command staff and people in the higher echelons, you got to know your people, man. I mean, you have to know, you need to know every intimate detail about their lives, but you should know your people and get to know them. And the reason I say that, obviously, because it's good leadership, but second of all, you're going to notice behavioral changes. If something goes south or somebody starts acting weird or shutting down, the better you know somebody, the better you're going to recognize that and get ahead of it. So again, those are all leadership, things that every leader could do better at. So yeah, a lot of resources out there, man. I mean, like you said, brother, it's a tough environment, man. It's always been a tough environment, but thank God people are getting into it like we talked about. But like you said, there's a lot of resources out there and people are suffering.
And thank you so much for
anytime, brother,
for allowing me to interview you. And for anybody listening, CJEvolutions.com and the CJEvolutions podcast with Pat Fitzgibbons. And man, this has been great. I got to be honest, I haven't had an opportunity to listen to your podcast yet. We got introduced by a mutual friend, and this happened really quick.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to listening to your podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate it, brother.
I will be. Well, I'll probably finish the book tonight. It looks like.
Yeah, let me know. So.
Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate you letting me come on your show, brother.
Yeah, no, thank you.
All right, man.
Well, you have a great night, and I'll talk to you again soon, I'm sure.
All right, brother. Take care.
You too.